Merci et bienvenue. Welcome. It's a real pleasure to be here today. I'm Michelle Gartland. I'm the Senior Trade Commissioner from the Canadian Embassy based here in Brussels. And it's a pleasure to work with Flanders Investment and Trade on this very important and topical webinar. I'm looking forward to hearing from the experts on the panel who are really leading the charge and playing a key role, an essential role in fighting against this pandemic. What I've certainly learned from this experience is that no one is going to be able to do it alone, and collaboration is going to be essential. So my colleagues from FIT and I have teamed up to get together today to bring the experts from both sides to talk about collaboration. We already have a significant trading relationship and a successful one with Flanders, and we want to build on that. And so today's topic will hopefully bring us even closer. Myself and my colleague Fabienne de Kimp are here to help make those collaborations and establish connections with our Flemish colleagues in industry. We also have agreements like CETA to help facilitate those by taking away barriers, tariffs, streamlining regulations, and making it easier for employees and scientists and the academia world to move across borders. So on that note, please don't hesitate to contact me after this. I will be here, and I'll hand it over to you, Yves.
Thanks, Michelle. Good morning from my side. I'm Yves Lapere, Economic and Commercial Attaché for Flanders Investment Trade in Montreal. I would like to thank our partners, of course, the Embassy of Canada in Brussels, Flanders Bio, Biotech, and Biofox. And I also would like to extend these thanks to other partners like the Embassy and Consulate of Belgium in Ottawa and Montreal, Québec International, le Cercle d'Affaires Belgique-Québec à Montréal, Belgian-Canadian Business Chamber in Toronto, and CanCham in Brussels. Here in Canada, we see almost daily in the news images from Brussels Airport as a logistic hub from where all the vaccines used in Canada are leaving from. Today, during this webinar, we want to discuss how we, Canada and Belgium, as partners on a research and development level, on a production level, we will and we can fight this pandemic and the next ones. So thanks for all for your presence, and over to you, Anne van Heesel.
Thank you. Good morning. Or should I say good afternoon, because yes, we are definitely crossing time zones with this webinar. Anyway, a very warm welcome to all of you. For those who are just joining, just a practical note, please mute your microphone and turn off your video. Thank you. And since we're on a tight schedule, I suggest we dive right in. So my name's Anne, and I'm privileged to be offered the opportunity to have a conversation with very interesting guests today. And I'd like to kick off this webinar and introduce two very knowledgeable men to you. They will be setting the scene, and they will introduce the biotech in both Canada and Flanders, Belgium, in the next 15 minutes or so. It might feel a little bit like comparing David with Goliath, definitely if we would be comparing land areas, but we're going to stay away from that and limit ourselves to biotechnology today. And I can assure you both regions are big in that area. So good morning, Andrew, and good afternoon, Willem. Welcome. Andrew, I'd like to start with you. You represent biotechnology in Canada. And could you explain the audience how the Canadian Biotech Hub looks like? How big is the ecosystem? What are its key elements? And I know, I'm sure you can give a 30-minute overview and still not be finished, but I'm looking for that 2-minute elevator pitch today. So we're only going to the 5th floor here. So Andrew, I'd like you to take the floor.
You have to unmute yourself first. Normally you should be able to unmute. Wait, let me try again. 1 second. Voila, try
It's on
now.
the
Normally you are a presenter and you should be able to. Right. And maybe you can go to Willem first, and
Sure, absolutely.
I'll try to fix this problem.
Okay. Well, Willem, let's switch time zones. Good afternoon. I know I'm biased for Flanders, of course, because I'm part of that ecosystem, but could you explain us how the biotech in Flanders looks like?
Yeah, thank you very much, Anne. No problem to shift. Well, you know the ecosystem, and then for the audience, I think it's good to clarify a bit. Flanders Bio is an industry association of 340 members. Most of them are Flemish. So we are, in fact, almost 240 of these are Flanders-based companies, and 100 or more are from Brussels, Wallonia, the Netherlands, etc. And if you look at the landscape and if you look at the history of the cluster, I think for me, there are three things that pop out. That's science, that's business, and that's government. And the synergy between these three elements has really made our cluster to what it is today. And if I may, I would like to clarify this a bit by giving an example, the example of VIB, which you know very well, Anne, and which is the Flemish Institute of Biotechnology, which is in fact a government initiative back in the 1990s, 1995, 1996, if I remember well. A research institute, now one of the leading research institutes in biotech and life sciences. And when they were set up by the Flemish government, they had a double assignment. First assignment was to perform excellent research to be published in Cell, Nature, Science, etc., etc. And the second assignment was related to tech transfer. And they modeled their tech transfer office to the offices in Harvard and MIT. And also their excellence was key in tech transfer. And if you look at the companies that are in Flanders today, you see that all of them or most of them are really built around excellent research tech platforms. If you look at Ablinks, now Sanofi, if you look at Galapagos, if you look at Eterna, if you look at many other of those companies, they are really built around a very strong tech transfer. Final element that I would like to highlight is there is a strong, and I call it a circularity in our ecosystem. And circularity, and I will try to clarify. If you look at the talent in Flanders, business talent, research talent, you see many people going from one company to another. There is no talent lost or very little talent lost. So you see a kind of movement of talent around the landscape, the ecosystem. And the second circularity is the circularity of money. VCs in our region have built up trust in biotech. And what you see is that positive experiences in investing in biotech companies in our region has resulted in second investments in other companies or in the same companies. And this, in this respect, what you see is a building up of experience in talent, experience in science, experience in investments. And I think these 3 or 4 elements have really made our region, our ecosystem so rich today.
Okay, thank you. I hope Andrew is not only in image, but also with voice with us now. Andrew, please go ahead.
I believe I'm back. If you can hear me,
there
we go. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Sorry about that. Right. So what I was saying on mute, I will repeat. You want to get a sense of the Canadian biotech ecosystem. You can look at Biotech Canada. It is very representative of the ecosystem across this country. From coast to coast, we have pockets and hubs in every single province across the country. It's a mix of industrial, agricultural, environmental, health/life sciences, biotech. In the industrial, environmental, agricultural biotech sector, we have a number of companies across the country that are solved for some of the challenges that are emerging as the global population moves to 9 or 10 billion people. And as I say, each of the provinces has strengths in those areas. The largest part of our membership and the largest part of the biotech ecosystem in Canada is in the life sciences health space. And in there, we have an interesting mix of the large multinational pharmaceutical companies where there's been a history of their presence and economic activity in Canada, mostly around the Montreal and Toronto urban centers. And so that's where you see a large multinational pharmaceutical industry presence. But the vast majority of the ecosystem and certainly Biotech Canada's membership are small pre-commercial companies, early stage. They come out of universities, research institutes across the country, and they have an innovation of some sort, a molecule that they're trying to commercialize to take it out into the global marketplace. Today, we've got 3 of our fantastic companies in the Biotech Canada membership in the form of Medicago, Vito Intervac, and IMV, very representative of the ecosystem and some of the phenomenal innovations that are coming out of the sector. They're going to talk a bit more about their technologies, but it's a pretty exciting space. And the other piece that we represent, of course, is the venture capital, the investment piece, which is a really critical part of what drives the industry forward.
Thank you. Would you say that before actually COVID hit this world, that there was already a strong focus on infectious diseases and how to handle pandemics in Canada?
I would love to say that we were really present on that front, but I think like the rest of the world, we all aware of it, but we're not doing much. And thankfully, there were a number of companies like the ones that are on the panel after this that were sort of in that space. We're able to pivot a little bit, and they'll be able to talk a bit about that. And I think that that's encouraging. Medicago had its facility in Quebec City. It was developing vaccine technology, plant-based vaccine technology, which is out of the University of Laval. Really cool. Out of Saskatchewan, of course, Vito Intervac. There are a number of other companies that are obviously in the space, but I don't think as a country we have done enough to get ready for this one. And I think it's an important conversation when we think about the future, because the variants alone with COVID-19 are challenging us. We're going to have to sort of keep pace with them. But I think more importantly, there's going to be COVID-28, COVID-32. You pick your year, you pick your virus. We're going to have to prepare for the next one. And what are we doing to do that? And I think some of the activities that have taken place during the COVID-19 crisis really sort of expose some of the gaps that we need to fill, not only Canada, but I think globally.
Could you elaborate a little bit? Because of course there were these huge challenges, but what are the opportunities? Could you elaborate a little bit on those?
Well, I think there's enormous opportunity, and it's been an interesting time to be part of this industry. It's been very exciting to be part of the industry through the COVID crisis, because you're part of an industry that's obviously going to be central to solving for this crisis, to getting us out of the crisis. But I think the other interesting thing about this is, as we start to come out and we realize the enormous impact the COVID crisis has had on the economy, we're going to have to rebuild our economy. And some parts of the economy are slow to come back. I think of airlines, hotels, restaurants, the hospitality industry, which are fairly significant parts of the economy. So what are we doing to replace those as they're sort of slowly coming back? Well, before COVID hit, the biotech sector was a really important economic center. It had shown itself to be a very strong attractor of investment and had enormous potential for economic growth. It's continued to grow through the COVID period. I think that now, as we sort of see a greater emphasis being placed on finding solutions for these types of crises, it's shown itself to be an even more important part for preparing for the future. But in doing that, you can actually be part of the economic rebuild. So I think it's going to be really exciting going forward that it can be both part of the strategy for preparing for future healthcare crises, but also part of a very central part of the economic rebuild for Canada and for the world.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Willem, how's that in Flanders? Challenges, opportunities, and how was that being tackled?
Well, you know that in Belgium, Flanders, vaccines are one of our spearhead, let's say, focus domains in the country and in the region. And what I've seen very quickly after the crisis popped up is that there was a huge energy coming from the smaller biotechs. What we've seen is an incredible effort by some of the smaller biotechs in really developing lab capacity, testing capacity, etc. There were CMOs, CDMOs that really helped out in filling vials, etc., giving or supplying lab ware, etc., etc. But there was also kind of community response. We saw other companies, other biotech companies that are really not in the health space that provided protective clothing that they had in the closet, that provided lab supplies, automation, PCR, centrifuges, etc., that were moved from one side to the other side. So that was really very impressive and very nice to see it happening. And we as a cluster, we tried to structure it a bit, help a bit, communicate. We did some communications, linked people to each other. So that was the very limited role that we could take and that we did take. Next to that, there were quite some efforts at the R&D side. So there is in Leuven, there is a very famous institute, the Rega Institute, on viral infections. They're developing. They're in a very nice stage, publication in Nature on a new vaccine that they've been developing. There was a new spin-off generated from the VIB together with the UCB, which is called Exivir. There is the efforts that I suppose Eterna will be elaborating on. Of course, there's the Janssen vaccine, Johnson & Johnson vaccine, and I see that Sonia is in the panel, so she will elaborate a bit on that. Also, Janssen took a leading role in the testing capacity, building up the testing capacity in our region. Many other initiatives that popped up at the R&D side. And then finally, production. I think Yves already mentioned it. Belgium has quite some production capacity in the balloon part, in Senef for the AstraZeneca. But of course, in Puurs, in the Flanders region, the Pfizer vaccine is being developed, and they did an incredible job in scaling up manufacturing and production facility there. So really a lot of opportunities, one hand, but a lot of initiatives, let's say. A lot of initiatives at the R&D side, at the production side, at the testing side, etc., etc.
Thank you. And maybe a last question for you, Andrew. What are the challenges that you still see? Maybe, well, for the COVID pandemic, of course, but maybe also for future pandemics, and how to address those?
I think the biggest one that's starting to emerge is domestic capacity for manufacturing. So we have a lot of great companies that are bringing forward novel technologies, new vaccines. I think where we've seen a significant issue globally is there's a lack of capacity to manufacture, and you know, these facilities are not easy to build very quickly, especially when you've got new technologies like the mRNA vaccines. So I think Canada strategically needs to think about what it's going to do between now and the next pandemic to build its own domestic capacity for manufacturing. I think that's an area that we've lapsed a little bit. The government has signaled that it wants to invest some money in there, but I think it's one of those initiatives that you need to do in concert with industry. I think if government decides to go it alone, that's probably not going to work very well. These facilities are state of the art. You have to keep them running constantly. You cannot just sort of shut them down and in between pandemics and then flick the switch on in 5 or 6 years and hope the thing is going to be up and ready to go. I think you need to keep it commercial in between the crises. And so how is that going to be managed? I think there's a lot of big questions there. So some significant investments are going to be required, but I think you're going to have to work as a government, and they're going to have to work with the industry to sort of figure out what the strategy is going forward. I think that's critical for us.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both, Willem and Andrew. And please do stay with us. We have a Q&A at the end of this webinar for all the speakers. And so for the audience, and also for those just joining us, we are ready to start the conversation now with the captains of industry. And for all of you participating here, if you have a question, just drop it in the chat. And my colleague Jan Wouters from Flanders Investment and Trade will be the moderator and share these questions with the panel at the end. So I think it's a unique opportunity to get your question out there. So don't be shy and make sure that they end up in our chat box. Thank you. So let's move on. We have a great panel of very interesting speakers and industry leaders, and I would love to hear from them now. Let me start with introducing them one by one, and I'll give you a question for each of them. So we start with Sonja Willems. She's Managing Director of Janssen Benelux, a part of the G&G group, the Johnson & Johnson group, and she joined Janssen in '87 in an international marketing department here in Belgium. But actually, she already moved to Canada after 7 years, so that's a wonderful coincidence, to take up a business unit responsible role and responsibility role. Ever since, she has been holding different positions within Janssen with increasing responsibility. So welcome, Sonja, and we're very pleased to have you on the panel. Well, I'm curious. Let's kick this off. How did Janssen and J&J respond to this to the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, it's a bit of a long list, so I'll try to keep it short. I think our first engagement started with the disinfectant gel because we got a call from a big university hospital because they were running out of disinfectants, and we actually within 4 days, we enabled our production site in Kiel to produce the first 5,000 liters of gel for the university hospital. So that was the first one. And then a few days later, we got a call from the government, and Willem already alluded to it, that they were really running into trouble with the testing capacity. So we actually, in 2 weeks' time, re-engineered one of our labs into a PCR testing lab, up to 7,000 tests a day. And we have been doing that for quite a while for the government. So that was, I think, the early start. Then, of course, you already talked about it, or Willem talked about it, our vaccine, which has been at the core and the center of everything we've done. So that has been for a number of companies, including ourselves, like a 24/7 kind of engagement over the last couple of months, let's say a year. And I think those are probably the most important ones, if I want to keep it brief. Yeah.
Back to you. Thank you. We'll get back to you later. I'd like to introduce Frederick Oors. He's the CEO from IMV. So we are in Canada now, and that's a clinical stage immuno-oncology company. Interesting that before IMV, Frederick was part of Medicago, who is also on the panel, and we'll hear from that company later. And he's played an important role, a very crucial role even in the company. But I believe that Fred has European roots. I think he's originally from France. And if I'm not mistaken, he also studied in Paris, amongst other cities, of course. So welcome, Fred.
Thank you.
Yes, well, the same question for you as for Sonja. How did your company respond to this pandemic? Because if I'm not mistaken, the focus of IMV was not so much the infectious diseases and more the cancer research.
You're right. So also a long list, but there's 3 things we really did. And thanks for reminding people that you really focus on cancer. The first thing we did was actually in cancer. So when multiple phase 2 trials in cancer, we are treating, late stage metastatic older patients. They, in most cases, that's their last option. And so the first thing we did, it's the trials we have 3 different trials they're conducting in the US and Canada. And we reach out to the hospitals and the doctors to make sure there could be continuity of treatment, because there's life on the line here for continuity of treatment. And it was very challenging, I have to say. A lot of things have to be invented and done differently in the way you conduct clinical trials. It's first and foremost, of course, maintaining supply and continuity of treatment, but also making sure that the way the trials are conducting, will still, deliver the clinical results that we need to have at the end to advance, the development of the product in compliance with regulatory requirements. So that was, very challenging for the team, but we've set up new ways to do clinical trials in those situations. and it worked pretty well. The second thing was also a top priority for us is, everybody has been touched really by the situation at work, but also in families, and we have a young a lot of young employees in the companies with kids and stuff. So we wanted to make sure that we were, again, reinventing ourselves in the way we are doing the work so that we could, offer a work environment that, was as supportive as possible in the situation. So we did a lot of things around that. And the last thing, very important too, we got involved with the Canadian government into developing a vaccine based on our platform. We had already done a collaboration in the past with a group of clinicians in Canada for another respiratory virus. And we decided to do it because we feel that, what we're bringing in the space is really different, that, there's an added value. It's complementary to what is done. We're not necessarily able, in terms of the focus that we have, to, to be in that, first race to deliver the first vaccine, but we can bring something that's really difference in terms of potentially extended the duration of protection that could be valuable in the future for this pandemic or the next pandemic. And it's really where, we have been focusing our preclinical and clinical development, and hopefully we'll be able to deliver some clinical results that will highlight, what this new platform can potentially bring in the different tools we're going to have to protect ourselves in the future against pandemics. Because I share Andrew's view on the fact that you look at the density of the population, the aging population. I was reading yesterday that in Quebec, the number of people in care facilities that will be in challenging situations is going to double by 2050. So imagine if we were having this pandemic. In that case, it would be even more challenging to what we're facing today. So I think it's a big call to action, and finding new ways to deal with these pandemics that will come back and will become increasingly difficult because, again, of the situation on the planet to manage.
Thank you. So yes, I think this is coming back here. Pandemics are here to stay. Let's move on to Medicago. Nicolas Petit. We're still in Canada. Nicolas is responsible for sales and marketing. He was previously working for Sanofi in different roles all over the world. So welcome, Nicolas. And first of all, Medicago is a bit, if I may say so, the odd one out here with a focus on plant-based materials. But I've noticed that you also made an important move into the Kovit arena. So I'll leave it to you to enlighten us.
Thank you. Medicago is, developed a plant-based platform to produce vaccines, but also antibodies. And the mission of Medicago is to prepare the world to face any infectious disease. So we are really focused on pandemic preparation. And in this regard, we were developing a flu vaccines when the pandemic struck, and we quickly pivoted from the flu. We're getting ready to launch a flu vaccines because we have now vaccines in regulatory review with Health Canada. So it was a crucial decision when it started to pop up, and before the pandemic was really declared by WHO, we started to search for the sequence of the virus spike protein. And then from there, when we received it, we took 20 days to produce the first vaccine candidate and took the decision to put all the project on the ice and focus on COVID preparation. So quite a crucial decision. And then we started to partner. First, we partnered with GSK. So GSK has significant footprint in Belgium. GSK for the adjuvant in order to maximize the quantities of dose available. And we partner also with Canada. We were able to get a contract to deliver doses for the Canadians, and with the full ecosystem, in fact, to be able to deliver a solution very quickly. So, quite an important move for Medicago, and we are very happy to be part of the solution in Canada, but also for other countries.
Thank you. And let's move to Flanders. and Stephen Powell, CEO of Eterna. And Eterna is a immunotherapy company. Welcome. Stephen started his career at GSK and held many different roles before switching to messenger RNA. And today, pretty much everyone knows about messenger RNA. It's become very popular. So I guess Eterna also has a link with COVID-19. So what has been your focus, Stephen?
So first of all, thank you, and good afternoon and good morning to everybody. Indeed, Eterna is an immunotherapy company. Our core technology is mRNA. And over the last 2 to 3 years, we have invested quite significantly, not just in vaccine development, but also in some of the supporting technology platforms, in particular the formulation that's required for mRNA. And unusually for a small company, and we are significantly smaller than the 3 well-known players in mRNA technology, we also invested in a GMP manufacturing facility in Belgium. So we are able to provide drug substance, mRNA, not only for ourselves, but for other people. Somewhat coincidentally, we had been, prior to the pandemic, we had been discussing various investment into the company and partnerships with Chinese investors and companies. And also in parallel, I happened to be a chairman of a infectious disease company in the UK, where we had already been working in a number of emerging infectious areas, including coronaviruses. So based on that information, and at the start of last year, we took the decision to reopen our infectious disease program, but not just for SARS-CoV-2, but also to look at other respiratory virus infections. And we took the view that this was likely to be here to stay, unfortunately. We took the view that there was every likelihood that strains would continue to mutate for the foreseeable future. And from a business perspective, we also took the view that the bigger players were going to be able to accelerate quickly for the immediate need. So we, rather like our colleague here from IMV, we took the view that we were going to look further ahead to perhaps 2nd or even 3rd generation vaccines. So as a result, we set out to, first of all, try and identify conserved antigens so that we could start to piece together a vaccine that could provide protection across different strains, and potentially not just SARS-CoV-2, but also SARS. And we also started to embark on expanding our formulation work so that we could consider using intranasal delivery to basically go around the needle. So those were 2 key steps for us: to use our technology to promote a slightly different way, to promote an immune response against conserved sequences, and also to deliver the vaccine in a way that was perhaps more suitable for a very large vaccination population. And coupled with that, we started to expand our manufacturing capability and some of our process technologies, which indeed took us to Canada. So we partnered quite quickly with a Canadian company to enable us to expand our work with formulation and indeed for drug product manufacture. So we have already evolved a quite complex supply chain where we ship drug substance, mRNA, to Canada to be formulated, turned into drug product, and then in fact shipped back into Europe. I think the key point of what we've been doing is, particularly with the antigen discovery program, which is now starting to yield quite significant rewards, not just for coronaviruses, but also for influenza, is that we could only do that in collaboration with other companies. So The engine of our infectious disease program is now very much a quite complex set of collaborations, both within Belgium, within Benelux, and indeed internationally into North America, so that we can work with hopefully the best scientists to pull together the best information with regard to conserved sequences. Then we can introduce that into our mRNA technology and move it through our process. So collaboration is pretty much at the heart of what we do, and to be able to address some of the problems that we see and foresee, the only way that we can move forward as a small company is through collaboration, so that we're ready for the future generations of vaccines and potentially additional emerging pathogens.
Thank you. And our last panel member, Paul Hudson, we're back in Canada now. He joined VIDO in 2006, and he's responsible for business development, marketing, and communications. And before that, he was managing several multi-million-dollar projects funded by Genome Canada and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So welcome, Paul. What's the VIDO role in the COVID-19 pandemic today?
Sure. First, thank you very much for asking us to present today. So I thought one of the best ways I could do this would be give a general overview of the organization to help with a general understanding of it. So VIDO is about 45 years old. It was created as the Veterinary Infectious Disease Organization and switched its name in about 2003 to the Vaccine and Infectious Disease Organization. Our history is in veterinary medicine, but what we quickly realized, or not so quickly, was that a lot of the animal diseases actually played as excellent models for human diseases. And so what we've done is used our expertise in veterinary medicine to establish animal models for multiple human infections. So as part of the University of Saskatchewan, we do not have a commercial role, but we do have a development role. So one of the things VIDO first did is we were the first in Canada to isolate SARS-CoV-2. It was from a clinical sample we obtained from Ontario. We were the first to establish animal models. We established 2 animal models. We established the ferret model, and that was really based on our experience with SARS. And we thought that that would be an excellent model moving forward. But we also established the Syrian hamster model. And I think if you follow the literature, it seems that the Syrian hamster model, or golden hamster, has really taken the prominent role in testing some of these medicines. We also quickly developed our own vaccines. So we're almost playing a dual role, acting as a CRO, although we are not a CRO because the organization has one of the largest, most advanced containment level 3 ag facilities in the world. But it's also the newest. So I'll get onto that a little bit later. But I just asked our clinical vet, I said, give me a pie in the sky number of how many hamsters we could handle a year. And she said, I don't know, probably 500,000. So the facility is in scale is really mind-numbing. So what we did is we've developed our own vaccine very quickly. It's a subunit-based technology looking at 2 different adjuvants. But I think one of the key things is a national facility that happens to be in Saskatoon. Facility that happens to be in Saskatoon. We've engaged with about 100 different organizations from around the world, helping test different vaccines, antivirals, therapeutics. One of the things for me personally that I'm most proud of is we've also used the infrastructure here to actually be re-sterilizing or sterilizing personal protective equipment for the hospitals. So we've been bringing N95 masks and other key essential PPE into the facility and using the Weber's hydrogen peroxide setup that is used to decontaminate or sterilize the animal rooms to actually sterilize PPE as a backup emergency supply. And this really started when I think everyone on this committee or everyone on this panel and in the audience probably experienced supply chain issues. And from a healthcare worker, first responder aspect, dealing with an unknown virus, that fear of potentially running out of PPE was fairly significant.
Thank you. A question I'd like to go back to Sonia here. I think there was you mentioned it already in your brief overview. There's different elements you actually deliver the service to the community. that was a question put forward by the government, if I'm not mistaken. And how did that work out?
And by our customers, yeah, and by our customers, yeah, the university hospitals, yeah.
Right. So there was really a coordinated response, and how well did that work for you? So they probably turned to you because you're, of course, Janssen has a leading role to play there, because the history you have with handling pandemics and tackling infectious diseases. So could you elaborate a little bit on the importance of the role of a government and the importance of the different players there, and then we could have the same question, maybe for Paul, to elaborate a little bit on the Canadian situation there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, I think with pleasure. And it has already been mentioned. You really see in a situation like this that the power is in the collaboration and the power is in working together. And I think we have a history of that in Belgium, where already a number of governments ago, they decided that biotech and biopharma would be a very important area for them to support. And all the different governments, right wing, left wing, have been doing that. And I think the result of that is now a very unique ecosystem that Willem talked about. So we have, of course, as one of the bigger companies in Belgium, we do have very good connections with the government, but also with the large university hospitals, with some small SMEs, with the whole ecosystem, with VEB, with EMAC. So the government also knows that if they need something, or if they have a question, they can always reach out to us, as they do with other companies as well. And of course, in the beginning of the pandemic, and I think also Paul talked about it, there was this enormous need for everything, not only PPEs, but testing capacity. There was a shortage of everything, if you look at it from the governmental point of view. So then they looked around and they said, who can we ask for help? And then obviously they come with the bigger players first, because there the capacity can be upscaled and can perhaps be done. The effect of what we do can perhaps be faster, bigger, than if you have to ask 25 people for a small additional effort. So I think they came to us first, together with actually the three other big companies, being GSK, Pfizer, and UCB. And we all actually, on the testing, we sat together and we had the same protocols with the four companies, and we could roll out the testing almost immediately, actually.
Thank you. I think maybe Paul would be best suited, but feel free for others to jump in to elaborate on the Canadian coordinative role, or how the government played a role, how the collaborations were happening with smaller companies, but also maybe with the larger ones.
So my first thing was that I had that when we got to some of the introductions. That's a better question, better for government. So I don't know if I'm the most appropriate person to answer that at all, but I can do it from the perspective where we were asked to play a role. So I think, like most other countries, Canada established interim orders to help drive, with Health Canada, help drive some of the newer technologies forward. And we're experiencing that with our own vaccine and some of the rapid turnaround from Canadian BRDD. I think the other companies would have experienced that too, rolling phase 1, phase 2, not having to pull those out. But from a much more personal perspective, the government put a lot of money into our organization to help drive operational capacity. So they increased funding for our operations because it was clear that this was a national facility. We've been asked, without, I think this is no secret, that for some of the vaccines, supply chain or cold chain is a little bit of a challenge. So the densest collection of those big freezers is obviously at universities around the world. So they were looking for capacity for that as they're putting orders in. For local, the Saskatchewan Health Authority for PPE and N95, and that quickly expanded to other key healthcare groups. For example, the dentists across Canada, trying to figure out how to deal with N95s as they came in. So there's some logistical challenges there. We do have a Canadian task force on vaccines and biomanufacturing. We have representation on that committee as an organization. It's really overall tough to say about the national logistics, though. I'll be honest with you. I think we've been in the media about 500 different times now with interviews. We've had the Prime Minister specifically name our organization 2 or 3 times, including most recently a couple of days ago. So We do have a lot of the country watching us as we roll out our own vaccine, but I think more importantly, again, it's helping the other organizations where we could to help drive some of their technologies, because we're still a relatively small organization, about 150 total personnel, and when you compare us to, say, Pfizer or Janssen, the size of our organization is almost insignificant, but the infrastructure isn't, which I think is key.
Thank you. Anyone else of the panel members would like to elaborate?
Yeah, it's Friday. I just want to help Paul here. I have to say that the level of collaboration we had with Vito and they were really a key infrastructure and not only in infrastructure but the skills and people out there were really key for us to be able to make progress in the development of a vaccine, and it would have been impossible for us without them. So definitely. Vito has played a very big role in moving forward, the science on development of vaccines in Canada.
Thanks, Fred, because we're not allowed to name companies that we work with, so the pat on the back is greatly appreciated.
Happy to do it.
And if I may, and to correlate with what Paul has said, I think the government was supportive in Canada with the companies like us, and it's really thanks to the support of government to Medicago also we took the decision to pivot. Otherwise, it would have been very difficult, challenging in terms of resources. So that was really a good response from the government to enable companies to move fast in the development.
Okay, so I think many of you have already indicated what the shifts that the different companies have made, acceleration programs. I think everybody has been involved with that. If you would look at your own organization, and I think it would be maybe good, maybe to start with Eterna or Stephen, if you would like to answer that. What is the biggest, well, as well the biggest challenge as the biggest opportunity that this pandemic has created, and how do you see that going forward?
So I think for us as a small company, the challenges are twofold. There's a straight operational challenge, which has to be to find sufficient people to fuel both our infectious disease vaccine program, whilst at the same time keeping our immune oncology programs ongoing. So keeping those two things moving together as a small company has presented a challenge, but it has been helped by the fact we've got, as I said earlier, that we've got multiple collaborative partners to move things forward. I think the other challenge is really assessing at what rate and what speed do we increase our mRNA manufacturing capacity. We had built it up over the course of 2 to 3 years. We're at a point now where we can further invest to further scale up so that we can accommodate both infectious disease vaccines and cancer vaccines. And so we have that challenge, but also we have now a potential manufacturing partner on board as well. So that alleviates that a little bit through our relationships in China. So those are the typical sort of decisions I think that face most small companies, where there's a big opportunity, both technically, scientifically, and also, of course, from a business perspective, and how we position ourselves going forward is very important. But luckily, we've been able to support quite a lot of our work through both government and EU grant funding, and that's made a big difference to us.
Nicola, would you care to share the struggles and the challenges as well as the opportunities for your company?
Sure. I think the main challenge is time. We need to react very fast, and while normally vaccines will be developed between 7 to 10 years, let's say, or even more in some certain case, here we have seen the industry responding very fast. In less than 1 year, putting a vaccine on market, it's incredible. And in the case of Medicago, we are aiming to late summer, early fall, which is also very significant, in terms of speed. So going fast in terms of what challenge it will imply for the company, it's to manage, the full team. They are fully engaged and they work like 24 hours a day. We need to manage the long time run, because to work like this for 18 months is still, a challenge. In terms of opportunities, that's a huge opportunity for Medicago to be known. We are in Canada, we are well known in Canada, but even yet, this is opening new doors, new partnership opportunities. And it's also, in a way, a challenge for, like me, commercial operation, because we are not ready for that, for this huge reach suddenly. So new requests, new partnerships to evaluate, and we need to move fast. So it's to prioritize, to keep the focus, and keep moving forward as fast as we can, while building the next step, for Medicago in terms of commercial entity.
Thank you. Vaccines are being, and vaccination programs are being rolled out in pretty much all over the world. So I've heard this, many of you mentioned that. Production, manufacturing, making sure supplies are there. It's a struggle, and we already can see that in the media. Sonia, could you elaborate on the J&J vaccine and give us an update there?
Yes, with pleasure. So also linking with the previous speakers on challenges and opportunities, I think one of the challenges in the development, if you look at the R&D piece, was making the right choice of your lead candidates. Because it has been said as well, we have like an acute crisis and we have a long-term situation we need to manage with this virus or with other mutants or with other viruses coming. So that was for us actually a very difficult decision on would we go for like 2 injections, which gives you more certainty, which gives you perhaps a longer, or would you go with 1, but with the right one so that you could deal with the crisis immediately, and also one that was an easy logistic one so that you could ship it throughout the world and also make sure that Africa, Southeast Asia would be covered. So those decisions were for us pretty difficult ones. We've made them, and we hope that at the end we'll be fine with those. So then if you look at the manufacturing, I think like many other companies, we started manufacturing at risk. But there again, talking about the collaboration with governments was absolutely crucial. So with the funding from BARDA, we could do a risk sharing on the R&D track, and with the purchasing, the advanced purchasing agreements from Europe, we could actually do some risk sharing on the upscaling of the production. So that worked really well. So that in September last year, we could already start upscaling our production. So that hopefully we'll be in time to really deliver. What is the main challenge for us is that, and I think for many of us, is that our supply chains are global. So I just, when I look at the COVID supply chain that we have, like we have in the US and in the Netherlands, the raw production, then we have the fill and finish in 5 different areas in 3 different continents. So all of our supply chains are local, where material is shipped from Netherlands, in our case, to the US, is coming back to the Netherlands, is being filled in Italy, and is being distributed throughout the world. So our supply chains are extremely global. And what you see now is, of course, politicians are really looking at their local market or looking at their local electorates, and they are doing everything to really protect that, which we understand as well. So we get in all of those discussions now where borders are being closed, and it's the most nefast thing you can do. Because it's not that we have our raw production in Leiden, that if you close that off, it will be distributed in Europe. It still needs to go to the US first before it comes back and then be distributed through Europe. So I think that at the moment is the biggest challenge, is that we are global companies with global organizations now being confronted with local crises where local politicians are making overnight decisions. That is really jeopardizing a lot. Like, for example, as you know, our phase 3 trial was largely run in Brazil and in South Africa, where they took the risk of doing a placebo-controlled trial. Now, normally, we shouldn't be able to even export a vaccine to South Africa after they did all the trouble and provide us with the data to get approval in Europe. So those things are very difficult to live with and very difficult to explain. So I think somehow, and that's what we were hoping from the EU, but they have a bit disappointed us there. We were hoping that, you know, the EU would have more this global view, but yeah, unfortunately, on the contrary, actually. So that is at the moment our biggest hurdle, or our biggest a nightmare.
Yeah, a nightmare. Yes. Wow. How's that across the ocean in Canada? Is anyone willing to or give us some insight there?
This is Paul. I could make a couple of comments if that's reasonable. So I think for our organization, I would view it as a real-life, real-time SWOT analysis. As all of this stuff came to us, and we're a university research organization, but with infrastructure that was needed by every company in the world to get animal preclinical data for some of the medicines they were bringing forward. As you can imagine, I said it was one of the largest, most advanced, but one of the newest. We were still really in ramp-up mode. And you can't just put new people in a containment level 3 with a virus that could potentially kill you. So we were faced with this conundrum of needing to train additional staff. And I think we've hired somewhere between 30 and 50 new staff over the course of the last year. Training new staff, but if we were training a new staff person, that means that person training that staff person couldn't advance some of the work for other groups. So we were in this conundrum of trying to balance increasing our effectiveness and capacity, at the same time recognizing that with that vision in mind to add new staff, we were taking away some of the people that needed to do the work at that specific time. So I think for us that was fairly challenging. I think one of the other things we're looking at is, and it's thanks to Sonia, it's really the Canadian government has looked at manufacturing capacity here and critically, and I think that has relate to some investments to our own organization, Medicago, and others. So this is going to be a balance between national capacity to make vaccines, and I would differentiate that from vaccine nationalism versus a global marketplace, and how that is going to pan out over the course of the longer term when memories start to fade about this pandemic, and they will start to fade. How do these manufacturing facilities have the operational revenues to keep running? And if that, I don't know if that's government support or how that's going to work out, but I think that's going to be a key aspect moving forward to make sure that what we've done is available for the longer term. The other big one that would be Andrew Casey in Biotech Canada is how do we, and I think this is a good indication, convince governments around the world that investment in scientific research and development is fundamental to it keeping not only preparedness, but driving innovations that are going to help the world. Worldwide, still, infectious diseases are one of the principal causes of death. So this is a specific case scenario that's affected a lot of people, but there will be other ones. And I said, can you imagine what would have happened? We work with another coronavirus called MERS, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, that instead of killing 2 to 4 people in 100 kills 33 people in 100. And imagine if that was the virus going around the world with that level of effectiveness, what would have happened to borders and what would have happened to global supply chains? It would have just been catastrophic.
Anyone else would like to comment?
Or maybe just to emphasize on what Paul was just saying, you know, going back to your earlier questions on challenge and opportunity, to me, let's be honest, you know, without the new technologies and the innovation that, you know, happened in the world of vaccines in the last, 10, 20 years, you know, we wouldn't be in the situations we are today where we have access to vaccines, even though there's not enough, but nonetheless, this, I think, I hope will will clearly demonstrate, the value of innovation, what innovation can really do in a real case, the value to human life, but also, which should be part of the equation as it always is, the return on investment. And I just hope that where we are on the other side, we'll be able to like Paul was talking about, to build a sustainable model where we can keep the race with nature on innovation, and always be as prepared as we can be for those new things that's going to happen in the future. So I hope we're going to help Andrew and the others to make sure we can really message this clearly, that we need a strong industry, strong innovation to be able to deal with those type of situations.
If I may add on Frederic, like sustainability is very important for private companies to be able to engage significant investment. The time to prepare, to build a factory, it's 3 to 5 years or more, So it's now time to prepare for the next pandemic, to be able to produce domestically for key countries. And it's also time, economics, but also integrated chain of response. If the detection is not working, if the distribution is not planned, if there is one single link missing or not robust enough, the chain will go for a toss. So each country needs to think it's time to prepare for the next pandemic, make it sustainable, and work on the full chain of value, chain of response.
Okay. Do you expect that, because that was recently in the news, I think it's happening a little bit everywhere now, that people are becoming, because everything went so fast, although I think mountains have been conquered, let's say, that some people seem to be reluctant to even be vaccinated. So how do you respond to that if someone brings that up to you? Is that a role that a company should take to help people see why vaccination is important? Are there other organizations who should be involved in that, or do you feel that this is something that would solve itself, and that Stephen, I see you shaking your head.
Yeah, as you can probably tell from my accent, I'm a Brit, so we've had a major problem in the UK for probably close to 24 years now, since the what is now one would now call fake news with regards to MMR, and that has had a very lasting impact on families being anti-vaccination, and in part I think it's because people haven't got sufficient memory to understand what the world was like before vaccination, with respect to whether it's polio or anything else. So of course there's always the risk that polio is coming back, and so I don't think it's the job of a company to persuade a national or a continental population that actually vaccination is a really important thing. I think it's the role of connected governments, united governments, to actually demonstrate good, strong analytical data to support the fact that the consequences of not vaccinating are so significant that people really should do it if they want to protect not just the young but the elderly as well. And it's such a big problem, and coming from the UK, there's a massive double-decade heritage here, which is now starting to play out.
Anyone else would like to comment on that? And please, just the audience, feel free to ask your questions, right? It's I think a unique occasion to drop an urgent question, or not even so urgent question, into the chat, and then we'll have that to our panels presented in let's say in another 10 minutes or so. Thank you.
This is Paul. I could make a quick comment. I would agree 100% with Stephen. This is not a company role. In fact, I think if companies tried to do this, there would be a backlash against the pharmaceutical companies trying to do it. I do think it's a role of government, the Canadian government and provincial health agencies. So we do have Immunize Canada. I think we're lucky in Canada that the population trusts the government, whether it's whatever is in power. I think other countries don't necessarily have that same level of confidence in the government, which causes some additional problems. So I think we really have to watch that. I am always challenged with social media and how that gives people a platform, as well as the media in general, if they try and spur things on. The media can take a positive or negative view on things. What I would love to see is more of a March of Dimes style movement where the population as a whole push this of this is valuable, we must do this, even rather than the government provincially or federally. I think that would be, to me, the pie in the sky, blue sky style thing is the people actually were the ones that drove this, and vaccination's important. And the challenge we have there is, historically, as Stephen referred to, we have not seen the impact of some of these diseases, I will say, in the developed world. The developing world is still experiencing terrible impacts of infectious diseases, but in the developed world, we haven't seen this for a period of time. And this has been the socioeconomic aspects of this pandemic has been an eye-opener for the world, I think.
If I may add on Paul, government, but also scientists, scientists need to speak up. Too much voice to people who do not know science, giving advice or, statements. Scientists need to speak up and own the field of media to explain the science, to explain different technologies. So I think companies cannot advocate, but they can explain in simple words what is the science, what they are doing, and stop there. But then scientists need to take the relay and explain why vaccination is so important.
Absolutely.
Who would have ever thought a few years ago that the general public would understand what messenger RNA was and an mRNA-based vaccine? It has been, I think, it is a challenge for all scientists, is putting this isn't meant to sound arrogant, but what we would think of simple science, but still bringing that into a mode that is understandable by the general public. Okay,
we are nearly towards the end, but I just would like to end with a question for all of you. What would be, if you're looking back at this crazy year, and what would you, as a message, like to convey or share with our audience that you feel is typical or is a really valuable message for what you've learned as an organization or maybe in your personal life, but looking back and also going forwards, I think the future is definitely important as well. So not sure who would like to go first.
As I have to leave, for which I apologize, maybe I could go first. And I think for me, having spent most of my career working in and around infectious disease, I would like to think that there will now be sustainable funding, not just governmental funding, but also sector-specific venture capital funding for infectious disease discovery, infectious disease vaccine and therapeutic discovery. And it's been very hard over the course of the last 20 years to actually convince a lot of VCs to invest in this space. And I'd like to think now that people understand the real value of some of this work, and that there is not only a merit in investing in the science, but there's also a commercial opportunity as well. So that would be my wish.
I think a lot of people will share that wish with you. I hope there's some VCs in our audience, so that's a good take-home message for them. Thank you, Stephen. Is there anyone else who has, maybe not for VCs, but for other members of our audience, or general public or college
Yeah.
scientists?
I can go next. What has become, and it's a bit linking to what Stephen was saying, you do see that still some governments or some areas are seeing the outputs of biopharma pure from a cost point of view. And you've seen that in the negotiations from the EU, for example, that was all about price and costs. And we see, and I remember my time in Canada, also the Canadian government at the time, I'm not sure about the current government, was also all about costs and pricing and that whole discussion. So I'm with Stephen there, that I hope that this whole year has taught them that the output of biopharma is really critical, not only for us being healthy people, but also for the economy, for our life as we know it. And all over the world, actually. So there I also hope that the funding will come, but also the realization, not just the funding from VCs or from governments, but also the realization of looking at output, not only from a price point of view and a budget point of view and a cost point of view. That's what I really hope. I also hope that we will learn from the collaborations that have worked. There have been quite some companies working together. I saw a question coming on the chat, but I think a lot has been done with the companies amongst themselves. I know that Paul Stoffels was constantly talking to the researchers from the other companies to see how in the beginning they could make sure that they didn't all make the same mistakes, so that they helped each other forward. Of course, it's not being spread in the media. Probably media wouldn't be interested in positive stories like that. But there has been a lot of collaboration. So I hope going forward that will continue. And I'm very happy in the EU to see the CARE IMI initiative from 35 companies, where all the companies put their drug libraries together, and they will be constantly screened. Also, when new viruses come up, we can constantly screen all of those libraries and try to find therapeutics earlier. So that I hope the collaboration will be sustained. Also, for example, now we could submit dossiers digitally, whereas before we couldn't. Also, governments came back to us within 24 hours. Before, it would take months before they seemed to have time to give us an answer on the most easiest things. So I do hope that working together will be continued. And then my last learning is more within my company, is the mental health of people. And I think that is really being ignored. And we've had, and I personally had some discussions with people from the government where I always said, please take care of mental health and also funding for mental health, because we're now talking about vaccines and infectiology, but mental health is probably worse from a funding and from an attention point of view. So that has taught me as well that not only myself, my family, my organization, but going through this is quite, very heavy for people. So I also hope that in the aftermath of this, that the funding and the focus on mental health of populations will also get more attention as well. So that would be my takeaway.
Thank you, Sonja. I think very valuable indeed. Some of our other comments, take home messages.
I can go. So,
okay.
Well, two things. First of all, this pandemic is not new, and it's not a surprise. Like, I've been 20 years in biotech, and I've been hearing about the pandemic coming since that time. But I think what's new, however, it's not the same pandemic that we had in the past. And I think, to me, I hope that, governments and people around the world will realize that, we'll live in a very different world. The environment that we're providing for this pandemic is very different from what we had in the past. A couple of examples, there's more than a billion people traveling every year. It was like 50 million back in the 1950s. The density of the population, the time we live, the age, and all of that, it creates a new environment. And if we want to be ready as humanity for that, and it's going to increase in the future, we need to realize that there's a need for innovation more than ever. And what's happening here is amazing. The speed of the innovation and the cycle of development is something we have never seen. So that's great. Really, companies step up to the plate, and scientists around the world. But we'll need more of that. So again, I think going back to my earlier comments on innovation, I really hope that this gonna really trigger more strategic thinking at the government level and across the globe for how can we invest in this innovation, how can we make it sustainable, so that we are always on top of what's happening on the planet.
Thank you.
I will just add, because I completely concur with what has been said. I will add that for governments, they should consider pandemic preparedness as any threat preparedness. So we have an army, we should have a capacity to respond to pandemics, because that's really disruptive for the economy and for the population. And for the population, I hope, Paul was talking about this will fade very quickly. I hope we'll sustain, like in a human response, will sustain a durable remembering of this pandemic, and it will help also people to project in the future and to see what is coming, what is important. You can think about ecology, climate change. It's also something that we are talking about it every day, but we don't realize that we should take action today, because when it will come, it will not be ready. So we should get ready today for the next pandemic, and we all have a role. The collaboration will be critical, because not one company can succeed to be ready. It's all together.
Thank you.
Just this is Paul. So just one point of clarification. I don't think it will fade quickly, but I do think it will unfortunately fade, because we saw that with SARS, not the worldwide impact. But that's key, where the general population elects its leaders. And if the general population says this preparedness, and I think that analogy to the military was fantastic, if this preparedness is essential for us, the politicians will have to continue to drive investment in science and technology and development. The other comment I was going to make is, and I was trying to think, is this fortunately or unfortunately? I'll sway to the unfortunately. I don't think we're done learning from this pandemic yet. I think the social impacts of what this has done, the potential long-term health consequences of who's actually been infected rather than vaccinated, the mental health issues, the disproportionate way that this has attacked is the wrong word, but this has impacted the lower income populations, not only in the developed world, but even within Canada, because of something as simple as high school sports being canceled, which impacts people differently. So I think those are some of the critical areas that we're not going to learn to the end of this. But I do think it's up to the scientists to continue to talk, and it's up to the general population to say, this is important to us. We must be prepared for the next one.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we can definitely conclude this panel with very clear and important messages, but we're not leaving yet. There's still, I'm just gonna give the word or the floor to Jan, who has been collecting the different questions, and
yes,
let's see what our audience has been willing to ask.
I will be your sidekick in the next 10 minutes. There are some questions that came in. I'll move from the order as I can see that they came in. The first one is, should there be even more collaboration between companies in order to tackle a pandemic? And what would be the role of government? Foster this collaboration, question mark? So what would be, should there be even more collaboration between companies in order to tackle the pandemic? And what would be the role of government?
Would someone still like to elaborate? The topic has been, I think, already addressed by a few of the speakers, but maybe not in combination of what could be the role of the government be. Is there an incentive they could take, or what would their role be, and how sustainable are the collaborations that are currently ongoing?
I can take the first shot, and after you'll complete. I think today the model is based on private companies invest, take the risk alone, sometimes a little bit of funding, but take the risk alone and take a bet. You take a bet on a platform, you take a bet on a vaccine. you don't know, even if the threat will come. So that's a huge bet. It's not sustainable by itself. The government, and international organization also can help changing the model, getting, partners around the table to mitigate the risk for each of the partners and address, because you don't know which platform will work. Innovation is critical, but for innovation, you need security for the companies to be able to invest and have visibility on the future, so to make it sustainable. So I think getting everybody around the table is the role of government and international organization, and to make the risk for each partners in the response to be lower and mitigated.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move over to the second question. Are international joint research funding programs well applicable and adapted to collaborate against pandemic infections? So are international joint research funding programs adapted to collaborate against these pandemics, these infections?
I think maybe the question behind that is as well is how flexible are they?
Yes, Can they
most likely,
yeah, absolutely.
Are they easy to tap into, or are these more rigid programs that are difficult to use or to apply if like in a situation like this where there's really a need to act fast, to change maybe also depending on the situation, solve problems that suddenly occur? How adaptable or how user-friendly, let's say, are these international programs?
Yeah, perhaps I can take a first stab at it. I think it depends. If you look at BARDA, when I look from my own company, they were extremely fast and extremely flexible.
Could you explain a little bit on BARDA? And I'm not sure that everybody in the audience.
Yeah, BARDA is an American institute that funds basic research and goes into public-private partnerships. So from the start, actually, BARDA was a partner and funded like $500 million, half of our R&D costs throughout the development of the vaccine. So they actually provided us with the funds to enable us to really do everything we had to do in this 1 year. So take a risk, go with preliminary data into the next phase, what you normally would never do. So that really worked very well. But you don't see that same thing in anywhere else except in the US. And then you get, of course, into the current discussions. If a US governmental agency puts so much money on the table, then if you get into manufacturing, do they get the first right? So you get into a very difficult discussion. So at the moment, Europe is discussing about what they call HERA, which is a similar situation or a similar fund that would do exactly the same for Europe. So I do hope that will work, and that also doesn't become too bureaucratic where all the states need to agree on everything, but that you really get a very powerful and a very fast and agile agency to do the same. So that's what we're hoping. What is of course very difficult if you get all that funding, our model is still a model where we all together try to provide as much value to communities as we can, so that communities are wanting to pay for that value, and so that we can make the profit to continue to invest for the future. If you then go into public-private partnerships, of course, that is a different model. So is this then the model for pandemics, for crises? Probably yes. And then we need to really make that effective and efficient and performant. Is that a model for biopharma going forward? I'm not sure, because then you're really limiting profitability and you limit your ability to attract private investors. And then you limit your innovative power for the future, for everything else that's coming at us. So I think we need to work together on different models for different situations.
That's a clear answer.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to jump to a question that's maybe related to it. The question is, have the interactions with the regulatory agencies changed in a way during this pandemic? So it's again this flexibility or adaptability, but now for
Yeah, I can start. The colleagues probably have experience with that, definitely. we are in constant dialogue with regulatory authorities. So also with the other vaccines, the rolling review from EMA. I don't know how it works in Canada, but that means that you can continuously provide data to the European agency, which normally is not done. Normally, you have your file, you compile everything, and you submit. So now it's a rolling review, which means that every time you have something, you submit it, they look at it. So you're saving an enormous amount of time. You become very flexible. The dialogue is almost continuous. So what we are concerned, and I think most of the other companies, what EMA is concerned, probably have the same feedback.
The same happen in Canada and in many countries, in fact. That's very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then a concrete question. I think it's already touched upon during the discussion, but it's very, very to the point. How can Canadian biotech companies partner with companies in the Flanders region? So really specifically, I'm not sure that's a question that's easily answered just like on the spot.
Well, I would start with communicating with each other. My experience is that if you start talking to each other and if you start exchanging ideas and thoughts, that you easily find common interests or common objectives, and then you start working together. There is trust, and it's just a matter of doing it. I think there is nothing that hampers anyone from working together. So just, I would say, reach out, talk to people, connect, and try to find a common objective and a common, vision, which it probably often is, and continue to work together in an environment of trust.
Yeah, and you concur, the preparations discussion, when you know each other, you are prepared to tackle an opportunity. So in the case of Medicago, we are in discussion with GSK on different business matters, and when it raised, like, it was obvious, let's sit together and let's try to find a solution.
Okay, maybe the last one. There was a remark on investments in public health practice at all levels. I guess it means that is there maybe a change in investment that's taking place in public health in different segments of the public health sector. There's a change in the last year. I guess that's what the question is.
Well, I don't know exactly what the question means, but it can be that I see in Belgium and in Europe that there's a lot of emphasis on increasing investment in hospitals with nursing staff, PPEs, rescue, medication, whatever. So that's perhaps what is meant. You will definitely see that, and I think there is definitely a value in looking again at the whole setup of healthcare. So if that has an influence on medicines or vaccines, probably yes, because at the end of the day, there is one government budget that needs to finance all of that. So there again, I think we need to look together at how to best organize healthcare, and that's also something that you see happening now, that some countries or some people out of the learnings are trying to do that, but we all know how rigid a healthcare system is. So I'm curious to see what will come out of that.
Okay.
I think this is Paul. Can I just add one comment? And I think it's key to the vaccine industry committees, the vaccine companies. I think everyone in the world knows it's cheaper to prevent disease than treat disease. And the ROI for vaccines for the 5 childhood diseases, at least here, the vaccine industry committee did a paper here, and I think it translates around the world, is about $18 saved for every dollar spent. So I think people have to remember that from a public health position, that the return on investment of vaccination is astronomical.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
I think that's it.
Okay, thank you, Jan, and absolutely thank you to our audience and our speakers. I think we've heard some great insights, and I'd like to before everybody leaves, I think there's someone else here still who'd like to take the floor and give us a closing word.
That would be Michelle and I. I don't know where Michelle is, but I can take the floor easily. So basically, I'll repeat what you said, and that's thank you very much, all of you, for attending the roundtable, for sharing the insights, interesting insights in the preparation for the next pandemic. I think we have some work to do, and maybe some fruitful collaboration between Canada and Flanders. So a big thank you for all the speakers: Andrew Casey, Willem Doge, Paul Hudgens, Frederik Ors, Nicolas Petit, Stephen Powell, and last but certainly not least, Sonja Willems. And to you, our moderator, Anne van Gijssel, did a great job. And to the Canadian Embassy, definitely here in Brussels, for the smooth collaboration. If you would have any interest in the Flemish ecosystem in collaboration in Flanders, and I think there is some interest, we will send you an email with our contact details. And please do not hesitate to contact us, Flanders Investment and Trade. Well, thank you. Have a great day. À très bientôt.
Bye now.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.